Hi BookTube, it's Gina. Happy Monday. How are you today? I had a really nice weekend, fairly uneventful. The cats are running around, so you may hear some noise in the background. Can you believe that it is Halloween, that it is October 31st, and that Victober is over, and that tomorrow is November 1st? I just can't believe it. I'm starting to feel like, one of those old people that complains about how short time is and how quickly the time goes by, but that's kind of what I've been feeling like this year. It's just been a bit of a whirlwind. So I thought today, in honor of Victober, because I haven't posted nearly as many Victorian Victober videos as I was hoping. This month was kind of one of those crazy months where I just didn't seem to have any, I'm not going to say time, because I did have time. I just didn't have much oomph this month to actually sit down and talk to you. So I don't know why, because I had a really nice month. My friend Gina came and visited. I've already mentioned we had a wonderful visit. But I do think that the beginning of fall is always a little difficult for me, just with the gray weather starting, the drizzle starting. It's always a challenging time of year for me. I am a sunshiny California girl at heart. So this time of year always kind of sort of brings me down a little bit, but I need to get over that. So anyway, that's a long roundabout way of saying, hi, I want to tell you about my 5 favorite Victorian novels. So this was a tag inspired by, was it Marissa? Anyway, I'm sorry, I'll link it down below. Roz at Scally Dandelion about the books turned it into a tag, and she was inspired by another video. I think it was Marissa at Blatantly Bookish. So I'll find those two and I'll be sure to link them. But it was talking about your 5 favorite Victorian novels over the last 5 years. And I wanted to share mine because of course I do. I'm not going to go in any particular order here, but I do have my pile. I surprisingly actually have all of these in paper format, in physical format, even though, funnily enough, this is my stack. I didn't actually read any of these books in the edition that I own. This is the outcome of my collecting habit. All of these books I read on my Kindle. And it was glorious because these are fairly chunky, except for maybe this one, which we'll start with. They're fairly chunky, and so reading them on the Kindle for me is just, I just love it. My first, though, is Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. Now, I also love Wives and Daughters, which I've read in the last 5 years, but this one had to win for me. Over Wives and Daughters, primarily because, as you know, I love my old lady characters, and the ladies in Cranford are just fantastic. This is like the Golden Girls of the Victorian era. They have some dramas, they sit around, they gossip, they try to impress the neighbors. It's just wonderful. I love this book. Now, the only tiny drawback for me on this is that it's got, the chapters are almost more like short stories. They're all tied together in the end. But I'm not a big short story fan. So that was maybe a teeny tiny thing about this that I didn't love as much, but ultimately, I love this book. I love this edition, even though I didn't actually read it in this edition. Isn't that gorgeous? This is the Penguin paper cloth-bound classics, which I just love. So this is number 1 in my top 5 Victorians. Next, let's just go to George Eliot, who, of course, has to be on this list. This is a big chunker, and it is also the cloth-bound classic. Isn't that just a gorgeous cover? And I read this, was it last year or the year before? I don't know, it's all kind of a blur. It's a cat. But I think this book is as wonderful as people say it is. Just such a character study, such a study of life and of the humanity of life, and it's just wonderful. I love the characters, I love the story, and I love this book. So that is number 2. Number 3, let's go ahead and just jump into a Dickens, because I read this last year for, oh my gosh, my brain, you guys. I can't remember if I read this last year for Victober or if I read this last year for March of the Mammoths. I don't remember. It's all a blur, but I loved this book. This was a recommendation from Kelly at Books I'm Not Reading. And I'm so glad I read this. I loved this book. It's a little, is dark the right word? Maybe. Dark. I don't necessarily think of Dickens as somebody who writes dark. He writes sad. Like, his characters sometimes just have such difficulties, but he loves his characters, and you can tell he just loves them, even if they are in a pickle. The way he feels is just very heartfelt to me. He loves his characters, and he feels kind of bad when they aren't having a happy life. And I'm going to juxtapose that with the next book, because I don't think this is dark, and I don't think it's cynical. I think it's very heartfelt, but I think it does have some difficult things in it, and people don't always have a happy ending, and it's a complex story, and it's very atmospheric. The setting is so powerful in this book. I loved it. So that is book number 3. And book number 4, I fell in love with this book. This is the Mayor of Casterbridge by Thomas Hardy. I read this in college, back in the early 90s, and I had no recollection of it. And I almost didn't read it because I was like, I don't think I liked it very much. This was the group read for Victober, and I just fell in love with this book. I fell in love with the writing style. I fell in love with the characters. They are not all likable. The main character is not very likable at all, but even though he's not likable, he's so well drawn and so well described that you totally understand exactly why he does what he does, even though you're shaking your head at him and going, don't do that. There were a couple spots in this book where I was actually sitting out in public reading, and I was like, no, oh. And my friend looked at me like, I was like, oh, Gina, don't read this book. It's too dramatic for you. There were some spots where I was just like, no, don't do that. But I loved it. What I was going to contrast this with the Dickens is, well, Dickens really is heartfelt and almost has some like a level of sincerity to me in his books that I really enjoy. This is the opposite. This is cynical. It's even though it has a happy ending, I have to read you this last sentence because this is one of the characters who does have a happy ending. This is the last sentence about this character, and it says, and in being forced to class herself among the fortunate, she did not cease to wonder at the persistence of the unforeseen, when the one to whom such unbroken tranquility had been accorded in the adult stage was one whose youth had seemed to teach that happiness was but the occasional episode in a general drama of pain. So even though this character is just like, yeah, I'm happy, but my youth taught me that happiness was but the occasional episode in a general drama of pain. And I love the cynical look that Hardy takes at his characters in this book. He does not seem to, I don't want to say have sympathy for them, because he definitely loves his characters, but in a different way. Like, I feel like Dickens has affection for his characters and feels badly when things don't turn out well. And Hardy also feels for his characters, but he is so ready to throw them under the bus, and he doesn't seem to feel bad about that. He's got a very cynical outlook in this book, and I'm thinking that his other books will also follow that trend, but I'm going to definitely read some more books by him. I absolutely loved it. My spouse is a little on the cynical side, so I appreciate a cynical look at life, because I tend to be the opposite, but I could see both sides. I love that. And then I do actually think this is my favorite. I wasn't going in order, but this is Barchester Towers by Anthony Trollope. And these were all 5-star books for me, but this is 5.20 stars. I love this book. I love this whole series. I love Anthony Trollope. He's not cynical. He's not heartfelt. He's just like sparkly. Like, it's funny to me because Dickens, Hardy, and Trollope could in essence tell you the same story with the same sort of sad ending or happy ending, and their perspective on things is so different. Trollope is funny. Even if he's telling us a depressing story, he seems to have this like underlying little gleam in his eye, which I love. Like, he's like, I'm gonna tell you something, and you're gonna like it. I just love this. And this book is I'm not gonna say it's a comedy, but it's funny, it's romantic, I love this book. I love this whole series. This is my favorite book out of the series, though, because it's fun, it's light, I loved it. I need to reread this because it was so good. I read this series pretty much start to finish over, once again, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, but I read it all fairly close together, and it was a sublime reading experience. Going from the beginning to the end of the whole series was just absolutely wonderful. So if you want a slightly lighter and easy-ish to read, this is not quite as long. This one is, and then not including the appendixes, is 423 pages. So it's not quite as long as some other Victorian novels that are out there. But this is the Oxford World's Classic, and I love this edition. So that is my top 5 Victorian novels that I've read in the last 5 years. I am definitely going to pick up more Hardy. I'm currently reading Dombey and Son by Dickens. I'm going to keep on with Trollope because I love him. Yeah, so that is it for me. What are you reading? I may hop on tomorrow and do some nonfiction November. I also have a pile of things sitting here. I am completely surrounded by books, you guys. I've got to organize my shelves, but I do have a pile sitting here because there was also a top 10 nonfiction books tag going around that I wanted to do. So maybe I will do that one tomorrow. And then, yeah, it's been a whirlwind. So anyway, I will talk to you later. Bye.